So we're here with Andy Kolodgie from the House Guys DC. Hi, Andy. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. Tell me, what is the House Guys DC?
So the House Guys is a cash home buying company. We offer cash for houses, and the process is basically an alternative to a real estate agent. We can offer alternative solutions, sometimes in the form of cash, sometimes in the form of seller financing, and we offer a way to get out of the house either quickly or at a staged time period farther down the road.
Interesting. And what happens when you buy the home from somebody? I mean, are you looking to restore it, renovate it, and then sell it?
Yes. So we have two typical processes. The first process is, yes, the flipping side. We'll typically go to a home and it's in disrepair. Sometimes it's a hoarder house, so there's just a lot of stuff, trash going on, and it's not really a house you can put on the market in its current form. So we'll go in, we'll clean it up, we'll fix it up, and then we'll basically restore it and put, as you said, and put it back on the market. The second side of it is we'll try to sometimes generate win-win solutions for homeowners and us, where we can create like a rental portfolio out of, rental portfolio out of the situation. That side's a little more rare, particularly in our market where the houses are a lot more expensive and the rent price is actually significantly less than what it would typically be in a typical market.
So, would you say that a lot of this is your full-time job?
Yeah.
Interesting. And how did you get into it? I mean, did you start as a side hustle, or did you just wake up one day and said, I want to flip homes?
We actually read the book by Robert Kiyosaki about basically leaving the rat race. And so, he talks a lot about real estate in that book. And we decided to buy a house. So we bought a house, we started renting it out. And that was going pretty well. And we were saying, okay, what's the next evolution of that process? And, everybody goes house flipping. It's a normal process, right? The problem with house flipping is it's actually hard to find houses to flip. And it's even harder to find houses to flip in big metro areas where there's a lot of competition.
My first home was a flip. I mean, flipped in 9 months, but it was essentially a flip. I bought it specifically for that purpose. It was
That's perfect.
The smelliest place I had ever been to. I think it was. I think there was 9 Asian students living there. It was like
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know. In my mind, it was, and the walls had they had the grease in the kitchen that was like caked right into the walls. It was horrible. I had to do everything to the place. But I bought it because it was it was the biggest property that I could afford. And it was very close to where I was living at the time. And actually, in the end, I moved into it, which was fun. It was very, it was a nice place to live. But at the end, I thought, well, I really wanted to move to this other area of town. I was living in the suburbs of Vancouver, and I wanted to move downtown. And so I did that shortly after, maybe about 6 or 7 months after I had renovated the condo. So that's an interesting story. So your first property, did you buy it specifically to flip and
our first rental property or our first? So our first rental property we bought to just rent. We actually lived in it. So Bigger Pockets likes to call it a house hack. It's a funny term for it.
No, it's true.
Yeah. And so we had roommates in the house, and that's basically where we started. And then, as I said, they paid the mortgage and more. So that was advantageous. And then, so our next iteration, as we were talking about, was house flipping. And the problem with house flipping is that you actually need to find the deals. And that we found was the hardest part, particularly in a competitive market like Washington, D.C. or San Francisco or New York City, et cetera. And that's where the House Guys was born. We tried a lot of different marketing strategies, and we found at the end of the day, search engine optimization was basically almost exclusively untouched except for the big names. And we kind of tried to carve out a part of the market for us.
Sure. I think when people try and get into search engines, the first thought is running ads, but that actually doesn't have to be that way. It's just the competition. You always have to think about your competition and what are they writing about or talking about, and finding niches to be able to get into, to be able to get yourself ranked, to get yourself some sort of visibility.
Absolutely.
And do people find you organically online?
Yeah. The market's definitely shifted over time. So particularly now in the wintertime, when the market's slowed down and people are less concerned about selling their home, it's definitely slowed down a little bit. And on top of being in a kind of a warmer market where the market's trending upwards, people are not as concerned about selling their house to a cash home buyer. They're just as fine selling it to a realtor and getting it sold in 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been one disadvantage per se. But I would say relatively speaking, yes, we're getting quite a few clicks online, and that does translate into lead generation.
Interesting. So if someone wanted to get into house flipping, perhaps as a side hustle, maybe they want to make a little bit of extra money on the side, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to do their due diligence. I mean, I would say that's probably the most important part of the whole process. And due diligence comes in a lot of different forms. Running the numbers is really important. Making sure the house you're actually buying is going to be worth what it's going to be worth, right? So it's easy to run the numbers and say, X plus X equals this, and this is greater than what I bought it for, right? That's easy. But actually understanding if those numbers are what they're really going to be. Did you bring a contractor to the house and did they say that number, or are you just assuming that because you read a book that said, a kitchen's going to cost you $10,000? Two very, very different things. Because like in our market, you want to rehab a kitchen, it's going to cost you $30,000 for a really nice high-end place. That's very different than if you go to Ohio or Pennsylvania, totally different landscape.
Interesting. That's good advice. And how much money do you need to get started?
That also depends. Everything's dependent in real estate.
Can you borrow it all? Can you get it all from the bank?
Yes and no. So there's a couple pieces to that. The first piece is in terms of the amount of money you need, it depends, right? So in larger markets, you're gonna need more money. In smaller markets, you're gonna need less money just because of the cost of the house. There are people where you can borrow money that doesn't rely on credit. They're typically called like hard money lenders or private lenders. And they'll let you borrow money at a very high rate, 13%, 15%, sometimes 11% of the low end.
So this is very short term.
Yeah, very short term. We're talking 6 to 9 months, and that's not even including the points. So, one of the ones we first worked with, he was charging 13% and 3 points up front. So you want to get a $100,000 loan? I mean, it's expensive. It's really expensive.
So he charges you $3,000 right up front plus 13% annual.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was not nice.
Wow.
But he let us borrow up to 55% of the house's value.
All right.
Which is important. I mean, in this area where you want to go buy a house, any house, mid-tier houses for $500,000.
Oh, so did you take that money and then go to the bank with that?
So you're not really able to go to a conventional bank and get, if you want to do, speedy house flips, a minimum conventional loan, you're going to have it for 6 months, and they're not really meant for house flipping. The only way you can get a loan from a bank to do house flipping would be a guidance line of credit. And that's kind of where a bank will say, hey, we'll lend you up to this amount of money every month to go do stuff with it. It's basically for a business, but you have to show in that business that you're actually performing. You're not just new to the business. You're not just a guy running around flipping houses.
And what did you call that? A guidance line of credit?
Yeah, guidance line of credit.
Interesting. I've never heard about that before.
Yeah, you typically would get them from like a credit union, not like Bank of America or TD Bank or something like that.
Okay, great. So, and then once somebody buys the property, they renovate it. Do you suggest selling it themselves? And if you do, how do you sell it yourself, or do you go through a realtor? How do you maximize that value in a property?
So there's a couple pieces to that. I mean, you could go the realtor route. It's going to cost you 2.5%, 3%, somewhere in there. But at the end of the day, it's probably worth your time just to do that. Selling a house by owner, although it's gone easier than it used to be, you're probably better off going to find the next deal than selling the house on your own. That's where that value of the realtor comes in play.
Yeah, I was licensed actually in Vancouver as a realtor for some time, and it's the same advice that I would give anybody. The knowledge and the negotiating experience and the ability to find clients. Realtor is going to be able to do that far better, most likely, than somebody who's just starting out in real estate. No, that's really good advice. And if somebody wants to learn a little bit more about what you do, how should they contact you or visit you?
Just put in the address bar of thehouseguysdc.com or search The House Guys. Will pop right up. If they want to contact us further, they can check out our social pages. We're on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook.
Great.
everything. And it's all at the bottom of our page, so if they just want to go there and
Right.
give us
And
a
actually, it's in the
holler.
bottom of the description of this video as well.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that too.
Great. Well, Andy, is there anything else you want to talk about regarding flipping houses? Something that I may not have touched on?
Uh, House flipping is fun. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a great way to get out of the daily grind, and just finding. I mean, fire is all about having that side hustle, right? And if you want to get out of the rat race, if you want to get out of the daily grind, and I hate calling it the rat race because it seems mean, but everybody has their own term, right? Um, that's a great way to do it. There's nothing wrong with real estate. And what's ironic, at the end of the day, you don't actually have to like real estate. You don't have to like houses. You can still get into flipping. It's just a different process. If you want to get the lead generation side, you can do that. If you want to get in the house flipping side, you can do that. If you want to get in the rental side, you can do that too, because at that point, it's just about management. So it's fun. It's a good way to make money, and it's honest work. It really is.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Andy. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.